Welcome everybody to the, what is this now? Goodness me, it's the November meeting 2023 of the Metropolitan Study Group. How time flies. Yeah, thank you very much to everyone who's joining us from wherever you are in the world. Once again, we're blessed because we have a very international gathering of people. And yeah, it's lovely to see you all, and really lovely particularly to see so many familiar faces. And yeah, I think that we're in a very good position to assist each other. And one of the beautiful things about our meetings is that the purpose in many respects is to offer aid and assistance to each other in working out the many great and varied problems of life, and to investigate the hidden mysteries of nature and science together. And so we are blessed by each of our presence in these meetings, and we are far stronger collectively for the fact that we're able to share these kind of experiences and share thoughts and feelings and opinions, and to explore these wonderful mysteries together. So today's meeting of the Metropolitan Study Group is going to be, in a certain sense, slightly different, because we are also presenting on behalf of the International Study Group of the SRIA. And so to introduce this in more detail and more formally, I'd like to hand over to the Chief Adept of the Province of Greater London of the SRIA, Frater Alex Raffaella. I'm just going to put you on to the pinned screen, Alex, and so go ahead.
Thank you very much, Sheen, for always your lovely, warm introduction to these sessions. You are the spiritual glue that holds the study group together, if I may say so. So basically, after COVID, the society, the SRIA, decided to implement an international studies circle, which is society-wide. And it's been very successful, as some of you who may know, and then those who are not members of the society. The society has provinces all over the world, from Canada to Australia, New Zealand, Holland, all over the UK. And there has been a recent introduction of the study circles being presented by specific provinces. So what normally happens is the international study group normally meets on the third Friday, which was actually last night. And so it was decided that what we should do, considering we always have our meeting on the third Saturday, that we would combine both of them into one meeting. So for those of you who normally meet on the International Study Circle and don't normally meet, come join us on our Metropolitan Study Groups, and for those of you who normally attend our Metropolitan Study Groups and are now part of the International Study Group. So what we normally do is each province will host the session and then just give a little bit of information about what is going on in that province. So there's been lots going on for us in Greater London. Greater London as a province was only formed just literally weeks before COVID hit in 2020, and we've had a very short history but a very lively history. And during COVID, we decided the best way that we could serve our new province was to start a series of Rosicrucian pamphlets, which we did, which came out. They were biannual, and I think we've had about 7 or 8, or could be about six, between 6 and 8 so far, and they've been very successful. It's been a very nice way to present the province of London, but also the SRIA itself as a more public face. I think that over the recent years, the internet and also the use of software such as Zoom or Google Meet, etc. There's been a far greater global interest or access to information that before, that societies like our good selves were a little bit hard to find. And as a result of that, we have been asked by the society to produce the first ever SRIA publication. And it's pretty much the same editorial team who was looking after who were looking after the pamphlets, with a few of our good brethren from other provinces. And we are hoping to publish the first issue in March next year. We are going to be doing a limited run of physical copies as well, not just electronic. I know we're all used to receiving electronic copies, but there is something so much more satisfying, I think, reading a physical copy of something. And it's quite nice to sit down with a cup of tea and a physical copy rather than staring at yet another screen. So we are going to do that through Martin Fawkes, who is our director of studies for the College of Sophia Hermetica. He also runs Lewis Masonic, so he's going to be arranging the print run for us. We have contributors from the northeastern counties. We have from London, we have from East Midlands and New Zealand. We also have the offer of a regular slot for an astrological column, because as we realized during the production of the pamphlets, there were some rather salient celestial alignments that have punctuated a lot of the work that we've done, and the synchronicity in that has been truly quite amazing, astounding, interesting, fascinating. So we thought that it would be a nice idea to have an expert in that field having a regular column. The first publication, the subject matter is going to be on Hermeticism. Part of the mission statement of the society is to study the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, but that small phrase gives scope to a very wide subject matter. So we're looking forward to seeing how that is broken down. We're going to have an introduction on Hermeticism. We're going to have an article on Hermes Trismegistus himself, the man, the myth, the misinformation, some work on the Emerald Tablet. So it's all going to be quite exciting. So that's probably what the most interesting aspect of what's going on in our province. And there's one other small little thing that we've been working on is what I don't. For those of you who don't know, the SRIA takes its membership from Master Masons of jurisdictions recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England. That's how we have been set up historically. And for those of you who are not Masons, once you become a craft Mason, there are many different Masonic orders to join, of which the SRIA is one of several. But quite often, to join certain Masonic orders, you have to be members of more than one Masonic order. So there's already a barrier to membership to quite a few Masonic orders. Whereas the SRIA, the only qualification you need is to be a Master Mason. And part of what the research that we've been doing over the past couple of years is, I call it the Harry Potter effect, as the most sort of commercial way of looking at it, is that there are lots of younger members or younger people joining Freemasonry who have spent a childhood being enthralled by the Potter books and grew up thinking that myth and magic and this magical metaphysical world of possibilities was felt more real than not. And quite often they end up at the door of Freemasonry, and sometimes, as those of us who are Masons, sometimes they can join a Masonic lodge and be fascinated with the symbolism and the history and the deeper meaning behind everything, and then they'll sort of give give Bob next to them a little tap on the shoulder and say, Bob, what does that mean over there? And they'll be often met with a non-committal shrug because Bob doesn't quite know. So we've been drawing up. We're quite fascinated in the SRA because quite often people will join the SRIA, and the first thing that they will say after their ceremony and the associated philosophical metaphysical discussions we often have until the wee hours after our meetings, they will often say, "Oh my God, this is what I thought Freemasonry was going to be like." So we've been putting together a little presentation to attract those younger Masons who want to know more about the symbolism of the stuff that we do and the journey that we're on, and quite often the SRIA, being a member of the SRIA, will make that Masonic symbolism come to life in a way that it never had before, because the study of what we do as Rosicrucians is a lot more three-dimensional than a lot of the sort of vanilla Masonic routes that people do take. So we have I've been in contact with the head of the Connaught Club, and the Connaught Club is a club in London for those Masons who are under 30. Of which I don't know if we've got any here. I mean, unless there's someone at the bookshop. Is there someone at the bookshop, Alistair, who could? Yes, I think there is, isn't there? I can see a young man behind you there. So yes, so we hopefully we will be presenting that to the Connaught Club in either December or January. And hopefully we can let those younger, philosophically and esoterically leaning Masons know that they have a willing home here at the SRIA, and what they've been looking for can be found not just within the structure of the SRIA, but mainly for the people that you meet. And I think the Metropolitan Study Group is a really wonderful example of the wide range of people who have many different interests, whose route to the truth is vast and varied, and our discourse between each other and our respect and love for each other is a wonderful example of why we do what we do. So that's it really from me. I will hand over back to Sheen, and hopefully we will be listening to a wonderful paper from Mario. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. There's a question that was put in the chat that I'd like to address briefly before our presentation today. And this was from Alex. And you asked, what is the link to the International Study Circle? So now the thing is, to the best of my understanding, and Alex Rufiler, maybe you could clarify this, or any of the other senior members, that the International Study Group meetings those links are only sent to members of the SRIA.
That is correct, yes.
That is correct, yeah.
And the Metropolitan Study Group, our study group, which has been around for over 100 years, is a completely open environment where absolutely anybody can come and talk and present. And, as we all know, we have, we are an open door and an open pair of philosophical arms to wrap around anybody. But I know that the International Study Group is only open to members of the society. So there are probably members who are on today's study group who normally attend the International Study Group, but and for those of you who haven't attended the Metropolitan Study Group, we are an open study group and welcome anybody from anywhere. So that is the main difference between the international one and the Metropolitan one.
So thank you, Alex. I would say about that's one of the things I feel makes these meetings very, very special, is the fact that they are open to all seekers, regardless of any differentiation, whether it be gender or anything. Seekers of students of the mysteries, we're all in this together. And so it's a lovely thing that we have, as I've mentioned, and on a number of occasions, we're very I'm very grateful for the women that choose to join us in these meetings, and we're very graced by the feminine presence in these meetings, and we would welcome more women in these meetings. So please feel free to mention it, these meetings, to anyone who you feel might be suitable, people of like mind and temperament. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully in time to come having a more mixed meeting with many more women to balance out the predominance of the male energy in these meetings. So at this point, I would like to hand over to our presenter for today's meeting, who is Frater Mario, who is joining us today from Malta. It is Malta, you said, isn't it? Mario?
Wait, okay, now you can hear me because the mic, I mean, I'm in Malta, yes.
Yes, yes. But Mario, you're usually joining us from Italy, isn't it?
Yes, from Milan, from Rome, it depends where I am. So, but now it's a session exceptional because I'm participating to the Sovereign Grand Lodge of Malta Works, which is going to be open round about 5 o'clock p.m. That is to say, 5 o'clock London time. But this is it. So we have all the time to read these few lines.
Mario, can I ask you, do you have any kind of PowerPoint presentation? If so, do you want me to make it possible for you to share your screen?
No, I have nothing. No
Okay.
slides, because I mean, this is a sort of, I've used this as a sort of course, I wrote the paper, Stefan received, you have all the paper I can send you. But basically, it's very important to represent the ideas. It was very colloquial. Everything started as colloquial when Stefan said Bacon was too busy to write Shakespeare's works. So it was something that was happening during our meeting. So it's very interesting to do something like that. It's more Italian style because people think that reading a piece of paper sometimes is quite boring. One end, I mean, from our culture, from our cultural level. And the other one is that you basically you don't know what they're talking about. So let me know, Shane, if I can start with these few lines, the Baconian hypothesis. So may I start?
Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry, I just needed to put some lights on. It's getting a bit dark here.
Yeah, okay. So
over to you, Mario. You take it away.
Okay. Title I chose is Bacon and Shakespeare by Frater Mario Umberto Morini. Sum ergo cogito is my nick, you know. And I wanted also a quotation, probably one of the most famous quotation of Shakespeare, Hamlet. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt in your philosophy, which is, in my opinion, the perfect description of what we are talking about this afternoon regarding the Baconian hypothesis. Why is this? Because we think to know everything at any time of our life, like Horatio, and we are not. And this is also the main goal, in my opinion, of our group of studies, and sharing some glimpses of knowledge, so our consideration, our opinions regarding certain subjects. And this is, in my opinion, a good example that we don't know what we're talking about sometimes, and we have to broaden our knowledge. So the Baconian hypothesis, why I chose the word hypothesis? Hypothesis, in my opinion, describes better the frame of this Koine cultural environment in which Shakespeare worked. But the most important thing I have to say is also a short comparison. Consider one thing at the very beginning. Bacon was a philosopher. We call it, with the modern terms, philosopher. He was more than a philosopher. He was probably one of the last men of the Renaissance. This is which is typical of his works. And today we define him as a philosopher, but is absolutely not correct to describe him. Also, for his involvement in science, in astrology, in many other fields of science that today, again, a philosopher is not considered to deal with. So he lived in a period of time specific, 1561, 1626, and he was a contemporary of Shakespeare. I wanted to add another contemporary author, a man who changed our culture, like Shakespeare, is Miguel de Cervantes de Saavedra. He was a contemporary of Shakespeare, and they have something in common. I take this opinion after, but I want to introduce this, a comparison. So this hypothesis is related that the theory that Bacon is the true author of Shakespeare plays and tragedies is called a Baconian theory or Baconian authorship, which is, in my opinion, better represented as an hypothesis, as I said before. This theory suggests that Bacon, using Shakespeare as a pseudonym or front, wrote the plays attributed to Shakespeare himself. This is the fact. Advocates of this theory argue that Bacon's extensive knowledge, intellectual depth, involvement in various fields, like including science, philosophy, law, I add politics, astrology, alchemy, and so, make him more plausible candidate for the authorship of the plays. And I have to say that this theory became popular at the end of the 19th century. By the way, when SRIA formed and many other groups of research of esoteric studies started, there is a sort of connection. I have to go deep. I didn't go deep so much, but it's an idea I wanted to dig up because there is this coincidence. Anyway, we say that it's not this hypothesis is not considered widely accepted among scholars. That is to say, the professionals dealing with the studies of Shakespeare's works, and the field of Shakespearean studies. Many scholars support the tradition of view of Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon as the primary author of the plays attributed to him. In terms of influence of Bacon ideas on Shakespeare's works, it is important to know that Bacon's philosophical and scientific ideas were primarily influential during what we call Elizabethan period, in which Shakespeare lived. His works and writings, essays, novels, and philosophical works discussed various subjects like nature of knowledge, science, philosophy, and human condition, and something that is, in my humble opinion, the most important tribute of English culture to mankind, human nature. In English literature and culture and philosophy is focused on human nature. If you have to say few words, how do you describe this? I say it's a study, a deep essay on human nature. This is my humble opinion. Anyway, so this is a sort of climate of the time. So incorporating ideas and themes that were prevalent during the Renaissance, the late part of Renaissance, as it developed in England in those days. So what the similarities in the writings between Bacon's and Shakespeare's could be attributed to a shared intellectual koine rather than a direct influence, that is to say, the same cultural environment. So it was an environment, as we use today the word today in modern English, in which there were people working, writing, studying, and exchanging their own views and opinions, and this is a cultural environment. And those who say no, Shakespeare wrote the papers, is that there is not a direct influence, but it was a sort of cultural environment, cultural background, in which they could any intellectual, any writer, any philosopher could have taken his own conclusions, his own opinions, or developed it. So the Baconian theory of Shakespeare authorship is controversial hypothesis and suggested that Bacon, rather than Shakespeare, is the author. And we have to say that in the end of this the late romantic period of time, by the end of 19th century, this was an intriguing topic of conversation in that environment. We have the so-called revivalism. Those who knows, for instance, the Irish culture, they know that there was the so-called Gaelic revival, which started in the second half of the 19th centuries. So it was another common cultural climate of that time. So when it started to review Shakespeare under this influence, in my humble opinion, of these late romantic moments. Proponents of Baconian theory argue that there were various inconsistencies and gaps in Shakespeare's biography, suggesting that a person of Bacon's stature and intellectual capabilities would have been more likely to create such profound literary works. They point out that Shakespeare had limited formal education and lacked of extensive knowledge of law, politics, classical literature, geography. I have to speak about geography because Shakespeare proved to have a great knowledge, by the way, of Italy's geography, displayed this in plays. On the other hand, Bacon was highly educated philosopher, leader, essayist, and a true intellectual of late Renaissance. So it could have been a plausible candidate for works like, as I said before, Hamlet or The Tempest or many other ones. Furthermore, advocates of Baconian theory draw attention to the cryptic symbolism and esoteric knowledge present in Shakespeare's works. They believe that Bacon, an alleged Rosicrucian and Freemason, encoded hidden messages and philosophical ideas within the plays, which only highly alert, initiated mind like his could have produced. This is another idea probably starting to be developed during this late romantic moment, Victorian age, something like that, as we can describe. But in the end, we understand that Bacon is part of what we call Rosicrucian, in a very generic terms, Rosicrucian movement to a certain extent. Again, not because he himself, or like me, or like you, we are Rosicrucian. Not because we don't need, a label, say Rosicrucian. No, it's not enough. It's a climate, it's a state of mind, it's a way to research, it's a way to dig up into yourself and to develop yourself with the help of the other ones, accepting different views, opinion, creeds, etc., etc. That's the point. And in that sense, Bacon was an open-minded intellectual. So proponents argue that Bacon's literary style, as seen in his essays and writings, bears similarities to certain aspects of Shakespeare's works. They claim that Bacon's use of metaphors, wordplay, scientific, philosophical interest aligned in the language and themes found in the plays and tragedies, providing further evidence to support the theory. So, however, it is important to note and insist that most of Shakespearean scholars and experts dismiss the Baconian theories. This is something that it must be clearly said. Otherwise, it's impossible to go on such work. The official Shakespearean scholars all around the world are absolutely clear that they dismiss this Baconian hypothesis. But being men of doubt, being men that they wanted to know, this is something that interests us. Anyway, so we have to understand other things, that the mainstream consensus is that William Shakespeare was the sole and true author of the plays and poems attributed to him, despite he may have lacked of formal education or social prominence of someone like Bacon. His genius and understanding of human nature shine through his unparalleled body of work. And this is the moment when I have to introduce also to the parallel with another genius, his contemporary genius, who was Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. There was a man like Shakespeare, an ordinary man with not such a high level of culture. And and a man who wrote a novel, which is the first modern novel, and then there is Fielding with Tom Jones, but this is the bulk of the problem. How can a man with no classical studies, no strong cultural background, can write Don Quixote or can write Hamlet? Consider this, and this is a support to the theory of those who say this is not probably Bacon's, Bacon's hands into the works by Shakespeare. So again, the Baconian supporters say are very rational to a certain extent, and the other, this is on the esoteric side, and from the esoteric side they are very, very clear. And they say these are the key. I put it down in my paper for I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 points which support the idea. Biographical inconsistencies. Basically, supporters of the theories highlight and perceive gaps and inconsistencies in Shakespeare's biography. Especially formal education. That this is again something that I already mentioned regarding Miguel de Cervantes de Saavedra. Lack of extensive travel, personal manuscript letters, literary evidence, intellectual capabilities. They emphasize the support of Bacon's intellectual brilliance, and which is a fact apart from the knowledge you have. You can have a certain kind of knowledge, but not be such an intellect, having such an intellectual brilliancy, which still today is very consistent. And linguistic analysis. Well, this is, in my opinion, strictly for specialists. And linguistic analysis, proponents of theory analyze the linguistic style, vocabulary, technique used in Shakespeare's works. And in that sense, they say, okay, it was not possible for him to write in that way, but this is the hypothesis. Cryptographic clues. This is interesting. Supporters say that there are hidden codes, ciphers, cryptograms embedded within Shakespeare's works. They believe that deciphering these codes will reveal Bacon's authorship, and this is really an hypothesis, as I have to underline 3 times. And then you have cultural and political context. Supporters of Bacon theory said that he had a necessary connection, access to cultural, and above all, political knowledge of the elites of his time, which would have been provided the means and influence to publish works under the name of Shakespeare. This is Stephen, when he said he was too busy to write Shakespeare works. There was, in few words, the system, the political system, the English state of that time was supporting this. This is implied. Of course, again, no evidence. I say to everybody, by the way, I am a lawyer, so without hard evidence, to me, it's nothing. But this is an hypothesis I like to deal with. Literary and philosophical themes. There are parallels between Bacon's known works and themes explored by Shakespeare's plays. Again, for those one say this suggests philosophical, moral, political ideas in both bodies of his work exhibit a shared authorship. Again, this could be the coincidence of 2 people working at the same time in the same place with the same philosophical, cultural background. This is the basic idea. But I mean, again, those who wanted to sponsor these Baconians' hypotheses, of course, they have to underline this point of view. So, it's more than a highly disputed notion, this support of this authorship of Bacon's works and Shakespeare's relation. And in my opinion, this sparks an intellectual curiosity and full discussion of mysteries of Shakespeare's life, and which are, to a certain extent, still today, not completely known. So this is probably something that is fueling these hypotheses as well. So they say, well, by the way, we don't know what was his cultural background, his studies, etc., etc. And this is the idea. But there are also other themes in support of these hypotheses. Some people states that they say that Francis Bacon himself is the first one who wanted to give us a clue regarding his involvement in Shakespeare works. And Bacon was a real philosopher, and his works have been analyzed for similarities in style, language, and themes found in Shakespeare's plays. The advocates of the Baconian theory suggest that Bacon may have encoded his philosophical intellectual ideas in the plays attributed to Shakespeare, much like hidden message and symbolism, like found those found in the New Atlantis. They argue that Bacon used the plays as a vehicle to disseminate his thoughts and beliefs, which encompasses topics such as politics, philosophy, and human nature. Additionally, proponents claim that there are linguistic and thematic similarities between the New Atlantis and Shakespeare works. They argue certain concept phrases and ideas found in the novel can be traced in other plays, suggesting a sort of shared authorship. However, it's important, I repeat, to note that these connections are speculative and not circumstantial. The interpretation of these similarities is subjective, and in the mainstream consensus among Shakespearean scholars, overwhelmingly supports Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, as the true author of the plays. The connection between New Atlantis and Baconian theory is based on conjectures, and it is not widely accepted within Shakespearean studies. So, again, there is a great caution, but in the basic idea is the following: is a sort of, I call it interpretation, because if you interpret certain works by Bacon in some way, and at the same time you interpret certain parts of Shakespeare plays and tragedies in one way, then you can find, of course, that certain points can be connected, but this does not prove automatically that Shakespeare was a frontman of Bacon's works. And he could have been influenced, maybe, because probably there was a free circulation of ideas and opinions, especially in that period of time in England. So this could be a way that maybe he heard something or listened to someone who spoke about certain themes, and that is something that triggered in his mind certain works. This is another speculation that we do not know as well. So we have other authors. I chose only few ones because they are not the ones writing that Shakespeare works were written by Francis Bacon. No, but they imply in their works certain references between Shakespearean works and Bacon influence. Delia Bacon was an American writer, and this is, we are in the second half in the 19th century, as I said. She wrote a book regarding the philosophy of the plays of Shakespeare unfolded, and presented arguments for Bacon's authorship, which is sometimes clearly implied as, for instance, in other examples, by the end of the 19th centuries, but also in the first half of the 20s, especially one very interesting is Shakespearean ciphers examined. These are two American mathematicians who wrote a book as mathematician trying to decode certain works of Shakespeare, comparing to some other, I call it the cultural style of this cryptography, ciphers, and so forth, that were very well known during the late moment of the Renaissance all around Europe. So this is also other authors, but there are plenty of other ones who wrote something regarding this, and many hypotheses on Shakespeare's. The main point, in my opinion, is that we do not have a complete biography of the author. So this could have proved that it was easy for people who wanted to suggest other interpretation to develop these ideas and hypotheses. I want also to point out some references to our group, Rosicrucianism, which is, I think, is interesting, because the question at that very moment was that, okay, Francis Bacon is, in my humble opinion, one of the forefathers of the so-called Rosicrucianism, can be seen as such, as a philosopher, as a man. So, of course, if we are dealing that maybe Francis Bacon wrote Shakespeare's works, so it was in a Rosicrucian environment, so it could be some ideas regarding Shakespeare. So I wanted to understand something more regarding this. So Francis Bacon has been associated with Rosicrucianism, also by proponents of the Baconian theories, despite there is no widely accepted evidence that link Rosicrucian principle to William Shakespeare's works. The Rosicrucian movement emerged in early 17th century, officially, and was associated with mystical and esoteric beliefs, and emphasizing spiritual and philosophical ideas. Proponents of the Baconian hypothesis suggest that Bacon, as a member of the Rosicrucian movement, infuses philosophical and spiritual ideas into Shakespeare works. As I said before, if there is an hypothesis, they say that there was that Bacon wrote the works of Shakespeare, so it's logically his style, not only the grammar, not only the ideas, the philosophy, but also the esoteric side, not exoteric, but also the esoteric side, was poured into the Shakespeare works. But the plays and poems attributed to Shakespeare explore various philosophical and moral themes, but themes are not unique to Rosicrucianism. Shakespeare's works draw inspiration from a wide range of sources, including classical literature, history, mythologies, religious texts, reflecting the intellectual cultural milieu of the time. While there are occasional allusions to esoteric and mystical ideas in some Shakespeare works, these references are not exclusive to Rosicrucian principles. They can be attributed and found to broader cultural and intellectual influence of Renaissance period, which saw a resurgence of interest in the occult and metaphysical and magic concepts. While proponents of Baconian theory may associate Bacon's alleged Rosicrucian connection with Shakespeare works, the mainstream consensus among scholars does not view Rosicrucianism as a significant or proven influence on Shakespeare's writings of plays and tragedies. The interpretation of any potential Rosicrucian elements of Shakespeare works remains speculative and subjective. And again, it's important to clarify that mainstream consensus among scholars does not identify specific Rosicrucian principles in Shakespeare's works. So again, it's a logical consequence. Suppose, just for hypothesis, by the way, that Bacon wrote Shakespeare works. Hence, these Bacon written works are influenced by Rosicrucianism because it were written by Francis Bacon. This is the logical hypothesis. The point is that we do not have any evidence, I'm afraid to say as a lawyer, clues that there were not a connection between Francis Bacon and Shakespeare's works. This is the idea. Again, regarding certain aspect of magic in Shakespeare. Shakespeare works often feature elements of magic and supernatural. Many of his plays, such as A Midsummer Night's Dream, Macbeth, The Tempest, incorporate magical themes, character, events, creating a dramatic tension and exploring themes of illusion, power, and transformation, especially transformation, metamorphosis. His portrayal of magic varies, ranging from mischievous fairies in Midsummer Night's Dream to the dark and malevolent witches in Macbeth. in Shakespeare time, belief in magic and occult was prevalent and different from nowadays. And there was a fascination with the supernatural. Shakespeare drew from his cultural context and incorporated magical elements into his play tragedies to engage, entertain his audience. This is the main justification coming from mainstream scholars. So it was breathtaking and entertaining, as we have to say today in a commercial of a movie, breathtaking and entertaining. So, this inclusion of magic in his play is primarily a literary device used to explore human nature, morality, boundaries of natural world, and getting a support from the audience. In conclusion, while Bacon's philosophical ideas align with certain aspects of Rosicrucian thought, there is no conclusive evidence to establish a direct relationship between Bacon and the Rosicrucian movement, by the way. Bacon's contributions to philosophy, science, and literature stand on their own merits and continue to be studied and appreciated independently of any connection to Rosicrucianism, which is absolutely more than obvious in my opinion. There is no direct evidence to suggest a direct influence of Rosicrucianism on works of William Shakespeare. Rosicrucianism emerged, it was in the Greek word, in my opinion, Rosicrucianism is in that very moment a koine. It was a koine at the early 17th centuries, and most of Shakespeare's works were written and performed before that period. Shakespeare plays were primarily influenced by various sources, including many other aspects of the English society of that time, because they were very up to date at the very moment. The descriptions are themes that were relevant in the English society of that time. So, to sum up, okay, again, Renaissance, especially late Renaissance, I think that at the moment that starts from the second half of the 15th century up to the Manifesto's time, more or less, this 150 years is when you have the, I call preparation, incubation of what we call Rosicrucianism. Is a fact. One day I will write something for you regarding the Council of Florence, 1437-38, the discovery of America, and the birth of what we call the Rosicrucianism, with other words, because we defined with one word, but it was something extremely complex. I think that the most expertise of Fratres are in difficulties to define the entire movement, the entire meaning of the word. But this is the point. Again, Shakespeare works, to sum up and to conclude, are not under the influence of Rosicrucianism, in my humble opinion, because there are no clues, as we may have regarding the so-called Baconian theories, which is, again, this hypothesis is extremely rational, based on pure reason. That is to say, a comparison, Francis Bacon, and I'm finished, I finished right now, but the comparison is, this is Shakespeare, this is Bacon. Mr. Shakespeare, no cultural background, no classical studies, no philosophy, zero. He is an ordinary man, a quis de populo, we say in Latin, a man of the people. And then we have an high member of the English court, a politician, first of all, because the very first thing, because we study as a philosopher, but he was a politician, top influence politician, strategy. We could say today think tank strategies. This is precisely in modern English what was Bacon. And philosopher, classical studies, wrote in Latin, blah, 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 blah. So when you read certain works like Hamlet, even Richard III, which is absolutely completely political practice of the Machiavelli's prince, because it's absolutely, you say, okay, this is Machiavelli's prince. Okay, can you give me an example? Richard III. Precisely. When you want to describe, say, give an example. Richard III. Richard III is perfect, you know. Or Julius Caesar, by the way. on power. So how can a simple man like Shakespeare can know certain things regarding the life of Caesar and describing precisely how Caesar was killed? Because if you read very carefully Julius Caesar's, you understand that the second stab is the one who killed Caesar of all the other stabs. But how can Shakespeare could know these? Only a man of highly qualification, this is something in favor of the hypothesis, can have the capacity to dig up and understand certain things, because we had a report written in those days, and this is very interesting to understand how Bacon read it, because they describe precisely how Julius Caesar was killed. That's very interesting, and of course this is in support of the Baconian hypothesis. Shakespeare couldn't read Latin, couldn't have this is not only a problem of knowing a language, but is to manage the language. That's a fact. It's very interesting. It's my experience with English. Okay, there are plenty of people who can speak English, but they cannot manage certain cultural things I can do, for instance. That's a fact of studies. So this is the Baconian hypothesis in few words. Despite that, this must be very clear that all the official scholars of all time never said once in an official work that the author of Shakespeare works was Francis Bacon. Could have said there are influences of the same cultural background, historical background, and nothing else. My humble opinion in the end, who knows? We are men of doubt, like Freemasons, we are men of doubts. And I find these hypotheses extremely fascinating. But this is probably because it's my character, my taste, my cultural taste. That's all. Nothing else. So, fratres et sorores, thank you very much for having me. And I thank you very much. And I have to thank Stefan, because he was the main cause of this. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mario. And yeah, I'm really delighted with that presentation. And let's hand over to the first people who wish to ask any questions for Mario or to comment in any way. And the first person is Kristen. Over to you, Kristen. Are you there, Kristen?
There we go. Is that better?
That's it. Yep.
Okay. This subject really fascinates me. And in the 1970s, I had studied Rudolf Steiner, which most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with somewhat. He was extremely clairvoyant. And in those studies, Shakespeare was talked about, and it was explained that this is what we learned, that actually in the troupe, the acting troupe, there was a man named Will Shakespeare who was not very literate, but a great initiate wanted to get these plays out. And he incognito used Will Shakespeare as the author for the plays, but the true identity wasn't given. But this is just what was explained, that the real Will Shakespeare was in the acting troupe, wasn't really very literate, and was just a name that was used as the author, but the real author was a great initiate. Just wanted to share that.
Oh, and thank you very much. And you said something very interesting. You said that Steiner was very clairvoyant. Consider this: we are an esoteric study group, so we have different rooms. That in court, I go to court, I need hard evidence to defend a case. Okay, but in that sense, we can use much more than our mind, the heart. So what you said is suggesting something very interesting regarding this, especially Steiner, who was a man, as you said, with this great clairvoyance. Yes, this is a good support. Thank you.
Stephen Goulder, over to you, please.
And Mario, thank you for your remark. I mean, this subject has always fascinated me for a whole series of reasons, and partly because as a sort of as Rosicrucians, at the centre of Rosicrucianism is a mythical, legendary figure called Christian Rosenkreuz, whom some, Robert Felkin particularly, regarded as being a real person, and in the first part of the 19th century travelled Germany to find somebody who he thought was real, who in the context, the writing and the style of the Rosicrucian manifestos, it's clear that he's a representative mythical figure. In reverse, William Shakespeare, for whom there is quite a bit of evidence that he was the author of the plays, has suffered the reverse fate, that people have largely now regarded him as being not the person that he was. And this sort of strange balance of you can, if you're a real person, you can become mythical, and if a mythical person, you can become real. And as Mario sort of pointed out, the development of the theories around Bacon being Shakespeare, or the Earl of Oxford being Shakespeare, sort of came out of the period of time when our society was when people were looking for figures in the past, particularly of the great Elizabethan past, who were associated with the spiritual growth. So these were people who were searching for the sort of, as Kristen said, sort of hidden masters behind real people, and for some of them, I mean, Queen Elizabeth I was one, and certainly Bacon. You can't quite see how, as well as their political and other activities, they could fit in writing 3 plays like Coriolanus or Hamlet, as well as do. So there are sort of practical issues that simply make them unlikely candidates. Despite that, a level of belief and commitment enters into that. And interestingly, I was up in a couple of weeks ago in Leicester at the Richard III Centre, which is built over the car park where Richard III was discovered. Philippa Langley has always been a strong proponent of Richard III, and of course he was discovered under the letter R of the car park, a completely extraordinary discovery. And what was also extraordinary was that the depiction of Richard III in the plays as a hunchback was widely discredited. He was not, that was thought to be an invention of the Tudors to discredit Richard III as an evil person in the archetype of the crippled, disabled uncle. However, of course, the skeleton was seen to be suffering from adult scoliosis. So in fact, Richard III was hunchbacked, but in a way that wouldn't have limited his ability to fight and rule. What was also, so in fact, this was something that that Shakespeare was actually very accurate about, and so it was quite so. In one sense, again, as Mario was saying, curiously, he was very well informed about the physical attributes of Richard III, who died in 1485, many years before the play was written. And so what I think this all points to is the extraordinary nature of genius. How is it that anybody, let alone Shakespeare, can write his plays, that Cervantes, who had an extraordinary life and similarly would have been is a very unlikely candidate to have written Don Quixote. So I think that so what all of this asks us to do is reflect on what is genius, how can genius emerge, and is there almost a spiritual, is writing a great play or a great novel taking you to the same spiritual place as those things that we study. So as I say, it asks us to consider the question, how is it possible for a human being to do something that is so transcendent, which, as I say, brings us back to those transcendent questions as Rosicrucians we're asked to consider. So, Mario, all of those things that come. And on a small trivial point, Mario, you used an image of Dr. No on your screen save. And at the moment, Dr. No is said to be the pseudonym of a mysterious figure who was behind the government of this country under the Conservative Party for 13 years. So that, of course, could well be you, I think, Mario.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. Yeah, that is, nothing happens by chance. Okay, especially regarding the few words you said. Again, we are in presence again in modern times of someone who was deeply involved in certain political circles, so they know precisely what they were writing about. You know what I mean? So that's a fact. But it happened many times, and we starting with the. I mean, in ancient times it was the same. It happened the same thing. You couldn't speak about certain issues, so you use many other literary solutions. You know, then you're creating pen names or characters. You know, but acting and saying or performing what it was to be underlined and meant to the so-called elite, called the political elite or whatever, but this is the idea. But the idea regarding certain Shakespeare works, as like with Bacon, is the same, in my humble opinion, is that it was all political, between brackets, in those days, okay? Well, golden days compared to ones that we are living today, but at least we had people like Shakespeare. Consider this. Make a simple comparison with today, and situation today is very quick to that point of view. If you want to actualize and to describe where we are and what times are we living in, is absolutely extremely sad.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Stephen. I'd like to hand over to Alistair and all the people who are gathered at the Atlantis bookstore in London. Over to you, Alistair.
Welcome all. Questions from my audience here. Just going to put them on the spot. They had warning. So anybody? No? Mario, I'd love to thank you for your paper, and for what it's worth, I completely agree with you that, in my opinion, Bacon was not the author of Shakespeare's work, but that Shakespeare undoubtedly probably used Bacon as one of his references, and he took many references from many people. And last night I was watching on iPlayer a BBC film, 3 parts, on Shakespeare the Genius. And in it explained, Mario, his life in terms of his plays. And he was writing 2 plays a year. So before we start talking about his knowledge and understanding, he took 6 months to write a play. So you would research it if you were delivering it. And in his day, in Shakespeare's day, there were 2 methods of communication: the royal family and its extended royal members, and plays. There weren't newspapers, so you went to a play to be informed on stuff. And the whole of life, the whole of history, wasn't necessarily delivered by William Shakespeare, but they were by other people. And in the documentary that took place last night, I say on iPlayer, 3 episodes, it explains the politics. and the fact that William Shakespeare told in his plays his own life. It explains Hamlet and how that and why that was written, because his son was called Hamlet, and his son died tragically very young, and Shakespeare was very taken with it. The reason for plays like Caesar and also Macbeth was that a new king had taken the throne in James VI, the first of England, and Shakespeare didn't want to get involved in the politics of delivering a play as the king's playwright to an audience that would cause the huge problems that there were between Catholics and Protestants. So he performed different plays, nothing to do with the politics of England. Anyway, fabulous thing. All of you interested in Shakespeare, it explained all the things I've never known about Shakespeare and had always wanted to learn. To you, Mario, well done. And I'm hoping that because of what I've said, there may be questions from the audience here in the Atlantis Bookshop. Not a one. So over to you, Mario, for a reply.
Well, definitely yes. This you confirm what I wrote about. The point is that again the usage is a cultural koine of that time. Is a genius. We are talking about a genius. What is a genius? It is a genius. I mean, I'm in Malta. I give you an example. I'm in Malta, and I went to St. John Baptist Church in Malta and Valletta to look at Caravaggio's, works, and when you look at his works, you have always to keep in mind this one simple thing: Caravaggio was a murderer. He killed, for sure. He was convicted for 2 murders, and we think that he could have killed even 4 or 5 people in his lifetime. He was not a violent man. He was a killer. He killed 2 people. He was convicted for that. And he started being a fugitive for all his life. Okay? The fact is, and in fact, the reason why he was here in Malta, it was because he was fleeing from Rome, from Naples, where he killed people. But at the same time, and this is extreme, of course, it's extreme. It's a good example for that. You say, well, this is not, it's impossible to paint in that way. Something on a much, much better position can be said regarding Cervantes and Shakespeare. The same. The genius is that, nothing else. You have simply to accept it. This is my humble opinion. I studied at school, I remember very, very well Julius Caesar. And they say, this is a genius. But I have to say, I was 16 years old, Alistair. I said, well, this is not corresponding to his biography. Again, if I wanted to add something to the hypothesis of Baconian. So how can this man have such knowledge? That's a fact. Okay, they said he read Lives, Parallel Lives, which was a Speaker's Pan translated at the end of the 50s into English. So he read this, he got all the information from that, blah, blah, blah. And they showed me how it was Lives and Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar's all connected. But I mean, there is something more that I would like always to add, it's just more spicy, As Alex said, it's not so vanilla, so it's more spicy.
I have something that is very interesting put in the chat by Alex. And Alex says, genius, what is genius? If one can see past and future, as if from a higher perspective, this is beyond thought. The question is, from where does non-thought or spiritual insight come? That's the question of the day. And I'd like to open this up to anybody if they'd like to offer their thoughts on and their feelings on what is genius. Where does that actually come from? Where does spiritual insight come from?
Well, you can see as imagine like a stream, and this stream can can be showed off at any time, at any moment, in any time, always. That's all. This is what I'm saying. For instance, I give you what my hint regarding what I'm saying. I'm rereading in a completely different way Plato's Republic, like as if it was not a novel, but because it's a dialogue, but as if it was a play or a tragedy. Start from page 1, act 1, blah, 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 blah. And I started reading this way. I'm rereading this way. It's absolutely crushing because I studied many times, many aspects, etc., etc. But if you start since the very beginning, as if, again, I give you an example, as if it were a novel, you understand certain things, say, wow. And it depends. When you have to deal with genius, you have to a certain extent, not being a genius, to adapt and to find a solution, a way of interpretation or something new, rereading. I mean, I'm 60 years old, so it's the moment of rereading. So that's a point. Anyway.
Thank you, Mario. I'd like to proceed now. Thanks for your patience. Jack, over to you.
Hi, Mario. Thank you for a fantastic presentation. And I think I speak with a lot of people when I say this is a really fascinating topic that we can all think about endlessly. I also don't personally believe that Bacon wrote Shakespeare's works, but I do think that there's a reason that we're still having this conversation 200 years after it was first put forward in the press. And I just wanted to share a couple of things that are things I don't really understand, but that I think help contextualize things in the wider history of drama that was happening at the time. Because Bacon did collaborate with Ben Jonson to write plays, as many of us know, I'm sure. And he was engaged in a circle of Elizabethan playwrights at the court as well. But his plays often seem to run counter to the message that Shakespeare is putting forward. And Francis Yates actually wrote a book about this called A Study of Love's Labours Lost, which has been forgotten because most of us in the community got distracted by the Rosicrucian Enlightenment. Because this was the book that was about Hermeticism. But she wrote this book before she discovered the Hermetic tradition. And she paints a picture of this specific play that Shakespeare wrote as attacking a group of literary men who we now call the School of Night, that were centered around Sir Walter Raleigh and Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. And this group of people were receiving Hermetic ideas and were somehow involved in the creation of modern science, and Giordano Bruno was involved, and Francis Bacon was also involved. And so what Yates argues in this book is that Shakespeare is actually taking a side in favor of the Catholics, and that you can read him as the first romantic artist who knows about these Protestants who are attempting to create a new science and is sort of attacking them. And it's a very interesting read, and I've read it, but I don't know enough about the history of drama to really understand it. But I think it's relevant to us because, Mario, you brought up this question about, well, is Bacon a Rosicrucian? How can we know that, like whether or not he is? Because there's, of course, no record of it and no evidence of it. But if you look at some of these plays he collaborated on with Ben Jonson, Jonson wrote a play called The Alchemist, which is attacking Rosicrucianism. It satirizes Rosicrucianism. It portrays alchemists as fools. And you can tell that this is a polemic that's being constructed to justify the new science. That the science that Bacon is trying to promote is not mystical. It's not like a Rosicrucian science. But then it gets complicated when you read The New Atlantis and you see that this book is in conversation with Johann Valentin Andreae's Christianopolis. And it's in conversation with Thomas Campanella's City of the Sun. So it's in conversation with all of these Rosicrucian books. So it's not straightforward. And so to sum up, what I think is so interesting about what you brought forward and about what Delia Bacon originally was talking about when she put forward this idea that Bacon and Shakespeare were one, is that there's this ambiguity in Bacon that's really hard to square, in that he seems to be against Rosicrucianism in some things he writes, and then in other things he writes, he seems very, very Rosicrucian. And when she put forward this theory, she was claiming that Bacon wrote the works of Shakespeare to sort of encrypt the Rosicrucian ideas and hide them. And in public, he pretends to be a scientist, but the mysticism is hidden. And I think that's something that's highly relevant to us today, because many of the questions that I know we're asking in the society are about how can we make Rosicrucianism relevant to science and artificial intelligence today. And so I think this ambiguity is still something that we wrestle with even now. So thank you for that presentation.
You mentioned ambiguity. The attribute of being ambiguous was typical given to the god of Apollos. Apollon was called the ambiguous, and this was a typical way to refer to the god. So he is also the god of the sun, is god of the knowledge to a certain extent. So it is a fact that our civilization is ambiguous, always. So nothing new. I can tell you something very interesting too. First one is regarding Rosicrucianism and its origin. I'm started to collect certain ideas regarding what happened before what we call the manifestos. And as you said, that people consider, Andrea defined these manifestos as a ludibrium, a joke, a sort of joke, you know. But this is just only the beginning. I want to go deep, but this is something we will talk later, probably, because I found certain things extremely interesting in Rosicrucian in the origin and what was practiced. But this is something that is out of our conversation. I have to say sorry to all. I wanted to listen to all the questions, but here we are 13 to 5. At 6 o'clock, I have to go to lodge. This is the fact. I have to change clothes. So I wanted to answer, to listen to your question, Azu, and many other ones, and so on. Thank you. But in any case, you are close to the reality. You said ambiguous. Consider this adjective. Keep this in mind, Jack. Keep this in mind.
So, Mario, can I ask you, does this mean that you have time to respond to Hasu and Alex, who have their hands up? Okay, so over to you, Hasu.
As always, I have to reply to all.
Bless you. Mario, very interesting. Now, my take on all this thing is that maybe we are just looking at the horse from the wrong end. What I would look at firstly is look at his contemporaries, those who wrote during his period, people like Marlowe, Middleton, Webster, Johnson, Dekker, because if you look at the plays they wrote, you'll find a lot of the plays are very similar storylines, similar ideas. They were actually using each other as foils to create different ideas. But, acting in each other's plays as well, probably, there's fact is known that Shakespeare acted at least in a couple of Marlowe's plays. So it wasn't as if Shakespeare was dependent on anyone. I think the whole situation was such that they were all very much interdependent. At times, I think, it's like this of a philosopher's version of pareidolia, where we see things that don't exist, but we make them up because it suits our conversation. Yeah. But I think the point that is, to me, is interesting is why would Shakespeare write such plays, such complex plays, if they're going to be performed in a theater where most part of the audience was going to be porters, servants, not your intellectuals who would come to the theater to watch it. These people would be in the front row throwing all sorts of things at the actors, and the actors came from what was known as the Lord Chamberlain's men. So all of them used virtually the same company to produce their plays and develop the stories. So I think that maybe we are always looking at one element of Shakespeare was someone else, but maybe Shakespeare was many of his contemporary writers combined together, because he took ideas from them and they took ideas from him. And maybe the comparison should be plays written by his contemporaries, what the plays were about, and then compare them to what Shakespeare wrote. Because I think you'd find that many of those storylines would be very similar.
Yeah,
or having the same. So maybe, like Jack mentioned, about alchemy and all that. So, he would have picked up all this, and because he didn't have to have the knowledge himself. If the other writers were writing with knowledge, he would just tap into those ideas and create another idea. So I think, even in today's theater, you'd see many contemporary writers, playwrights, would use a part of another person's play and create a new play. But this is not something that we can ever, but there is a lot of knowledge that is there in those plays that we never think about. Messages, subliminal messages that we don't actually think that, what is he trying to really say? Are we really looking at the message, or are we looking at the play? If you're looking at the play, it's a story. If you're looking at the message, it's much deeper. He was trying to pass a message on which was only audible and visible to those who were in the know.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Azu. The fact is that, as it was mentioned by Stefan before, the theater was what we call today cinemas. In the 20s, and today could be also the culture of serials that we have on Netflix. But that's a fact. Those who control these source of ideas can pass the story, as you said, but the ideas are deeper. That's the point. But this was since the Greek time that it was embodied a message into the story. But the vast majority of the audience went simply to be entertained. People like to be entertained. That's a fact. In all the civilization, not only the Western, but in India, in China, wherever you have a high civilization, people wanted to be entertained. So the entertainment is different. But the basis is the same. People like to gather as an audience and to be entertained. This is the view, Azu. So this was very well known by the political elite running England in those days. Give you a message, entertain people. That's all.
There was something called the War of the Theatres. So, when you could write prose, you couldn't write them, so you converted it to theatre. And then you could talk about all the things that you were against with the king or the queen or the country. But Mario will talk further. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hasu. I'd just like to pick up on something, just as offering some speculation regarding what Jack was saying earlier about the ambiguity and potentially Bacon being somehow, in some ways, anti-Rosicrucian. If he was in fact a prominent politician and an advocate of the emerging sciences, then it's quite possible that he, like I would speculate, a similar thing happened with Isaac Newton, that they would have wished to distance themselves somewhat from being associated with Rosicrucian studies in favor of their retaining their credibility as potential scientists. So that's just a thought I had as a possibility, just speculating there. I welcome any thoughts on that.
It's an immense, it's an ocean that you're speaking about, an ocean, Shane. It is something that happened, in my humble opinion, again, starting from the second half of the 15th century. There is an expression I found, but this is something that must be talked, but just only this, ars abolita. What is, it's the forgotten, not abolita is not abolished, but is forgotten or forbidden technique. Ars in Latin means what we use in modern English, we use technique. the Greek word technique to describe what is ars, because we think that ars come art. Art is another meaning. This is very funny, but also in Italian it works as such. Arte is art and is not ars at all. It's a northern pair. This is a northern pair for, especially for those who speak Romance languages. But anyway, ars abolita is a technique which was not abolished, but only as forbidden or put aside. And this is very interesting. I found these in epitaph on the tomb of a great architect who was the first one who created project of the Sixtine Chapel. People think of Michelangelo. No, this was this man. We will speak about him. But this man wrote this ars abolitum, the forbidden or put aside technique. What does it mean? You will see the pics. I'm going to send you some picture. It's very small, consider it's a small place, okay? But you will understand. And maybe we can all help each other to understand all the symbols, incredible symbols around that stuff. So I'm going to send you this, and you have to circulate, because this is an example of what you just said is a notion. We are facing ars abolita, and in this sense, Newton was between brackets ashamed. You know what I mean? He was. Because it was lighting, going to, no, I'm not there. No, nothing. And this is it. And this is also Galileo stuff. He was a great astrologist, for instance, but he simply spoke about planets, the moon, Jupiter's moons, but never speaking about your astro chart. That basically he got very good money on doing this, by the way. Consider this.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mario. I know that you're pressed for time, but we have one more person with their hand up. That's Stephen Goulder. Maybe Stephen, under the circumstances, this could be the final question or comment for Mario.
I was really going to come back to your point, Shane, about, in a sense, politics and science. I think most people in the late 15th, into the 16th century could combine those things that we regard as hermetic with an emerging science. So I think that to talk about a world populated by magicians, spirits, alchemy, and astrology was not was expected. You would, if you're well educated, you combine that with science. I think the difference to our world is that London was 200,000 people, the Theatre Community 200. Politics was all, and the court could change its political influence in a moment, and you negotiated your way through Protestantism, Catholicism. I mean, after all, André was proposing, from a Protestant perspective, reform in a Catholic Europe. So there are sorts of dimensions then that were hugely important, like different religious perspectives that were more controversial. Now we would tend to regard a leading scientist having a belief in alchemy or astrology as being terribly controversial. Then it wasn't. So in one sense, they're very different worlds, but the worlds of politics then, now, and depicted are the same. The world of human relationships. And as Mario said, when artists were murderers, and some and indeed some murderers were therefore artists. Yeah. Quite different cultural considerations that we have now, but fantastic paper, Mario.
Yeah, thank you to all.
Mario, Mario, I was going to just add to Stephen's thing and just say, the thing that came across in the documentaries last night that I watched was they were saying that a lot of what Shakespeare was talking about in his plays is topical today 100%, especially when it comes to one of his plays was very much observational about people coming to this country, England, let's say, but it applies to the whole of Europe, people coming in who are from overseas and got nowhere else to go. And he deals with what we talk about as boat people in his plays in that period.
Well, that's great, but this is part of the genius. How can you, I mean, what is genius? Someone wrote, this is genius. That's all. It's clairvoyance. Clairvoyance. Do call it what you want. Call X, call whatever you want. But this is genius.
Well, Mario, if I just say, we've been having a conversation in amongst the questions and the answers here, and I think the overall thing we agreed here was that Shakespeare had a team, and as part of that team, they brought in information from people like Bacon, but also lots of other people and lots of other influences. And there's a lot more to him than on the surface.
Yeah.
Your paper has highlighted this beautifully.
Okay. I'm very happy. I thank you all. I'm sorry, but I go and change my dress because I must be very extremely formal. Okay, that's it. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mario. Wonderful.
Hello, Mario.
I have many other things in my mind, but this is something that I have to speak with you very closely when I come over. We speak because there are certain crazy ideas I have in my opinion.
Wonderful. Bring them
Mario,
on. Bring them on, Mario.
Cheers. Thank you.
Take good care, Mario.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, yeah, on behalf of the Metropolitan Study Group of the SRIA, a huge thank you to Frater Mario for that presentation. Alex, could I hand back over to you, maybe just to close the meeting formally for the International Study Group?
Certainly. I hope those of you who have arrived today from the International Study Group and experienced the Metropolitan Study Group for the first time, you are always welcome to come back into our hearth. For those of you who may be close to London at all, where Alistair was asking questions from is the basement of the Atlantis Bookshop in London, which is the spiritual home of the Metropolitan Study Group. So for those of you who've come for the first time, please do come back. And I think it's just been, today has been a really wonderful example of what the Metropolitan Study Group is. It's a very wonderful, lively, interesting forum for fantastical, wonderful discourse. And I think Frater Mario's paper and the following discussion afterwards has been a wonderful example of that. So please do come back. And for the regulars of the Metropolitan Study Group, thank you once again. It's always lovely to see the same faces on the screen time after time after time, which means that we must be doing something right amongst each other to keep coming together with this wonderful group of like minds. So thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting, where I do believe Frater Sheen will be giving us his annual meditation for the winter solstice. Am I correct, Sheen?
Yes, that is correct. And all being well, I should be having the great pleasure of co-presenting that meeting with my dear friend Barry Down from New Zealand, who some of you may remember co-presented for the Metropolitan Study Group a few months ago. And Barry is a wonderful spiritual astrologer. He's a very learned and very experienced spiritual astrologer. And so, as Alex mentioned earlier, over the recent years, part of the work that we've done, including the publication and the release of the Rosicrucian pamphlets, have coincided with some extraordinary and very poignant and potent astrological events. And these are ongoing. It's been like, the thing about buses, there's nothing happens and then several come all at once. It's been very much like this over recent years, with some really extraordinary astrological events taking place that are really significant in relation to the changes which are taking place on the world stage as we are gathering here in this moment now. And over the next 20 years, the next 100 years, things are going to really shift and change. And so we have an opportunity, if we are aware of these certain astrological events, which are, if you like, I've likened this to a barrel lock. When you put the key in the lock, it turns one bit of the barrel, and then the next bit, and then the next bit, and then the doors unlocks. It's a little bit like this. So if we can make very positive use of these moments where a certain unlocking is taking place in the heavenly realms, and the influences that then are pouring, if you, so to speak, into the hearts and minds of humanity due to these new influences coming through. If we can tune into this and do our very best to become the best versions of ourselves, both as individuals and also, very importantly, collectively, then there's great power in this. And the world is crying out for change. It's I mentioned this a while ago. There's a film that came out years ago called Koyaanisqatsi, which is a Hopi Indian word, which means a way of living which calls for another way of living. This is very much where we are. And so we have, I feel, a great responsibility to do whatever we can, like I say, as individuals, but also collectively, especially when we gather in these ways from all corners of the globe, to connect from our hearts with the aim of aligning ourselves with the highest spiritual influences for the greatest positive change that can come through for all humanity and all other forms of life which we share this wonderful planet with, very importantly. So anyway, I'll stop there. And I look forward to seeing you all next month on the 3rd Saturday of December, which will be obviously the last of the meetings for the Metropolitan Study Group for 2023. And yeah, lots of love to everybody. Thanks very, very much for joining us, wherever you are. Hello, John. Thank you very much, sir. Lovely to see you. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Great to see everyone in London.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Hasu. God bless everyone. Bye.